Hello everybody, this is Kai-Isaiah Jamal and Rene Matić here. We're just going to have a little chat because why not? Because we miss each other. It's so weird. We've never done like a FaceTime before, have we?
No, I don't really do FaceTime. It's not like, I feel sometimes I find it like inconvenient. Like you can't put someone somewhere and just like do things. So like we were saying, you have to designate time to it.
Yeah,
so
I agree. Yeah, I know. It's so weird. Like at the moment, it's just like that's what I mean. Before, like when we were speaking earlier, like the FaceTime element of lockdown just takes up like a huge chunk of your day. And it's like before the FaceTime, it was morning, and then after the FaceTime, it's like evening, and you're like, well, what happened?
yeah.
So,
And all the days are merging into one.
yeah, exactly. But now it's evening, so we can party. So I feel like we should just, I mean, we haven't got, well, I didn't write down any what are they called?
Prompts.
I didn't write down any prompts because I just thought, I saw you the other day and we had a nice chat, so I thought we'd just do that again.
Yes, let's just follow it on.
So you were saying that you are wanting to work towards like a project, which I feel like is something that is so important, because after my show happened, I literally had this thing when I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know who I am now. Like I need something to work towards. And I didn't realize how I was like convenient it was to have a show open at this time, because it just meant that I didn't have to think about anything else. And I was just like,
focused.
Yeah. So do you feel like that's what you need?
Yeah, I feel like I need something that like can like take me out of like a reality, like in a sense of like an escape.
Yeah.
And also something that I think is really important to like make work in this time. Not necessarily like always about this time, but I think like it's imperative to us as like creators to keep creating, because like if we just stop and everything stops, then you have these kind of like cultural gaps. Like say in like 150 years, if none of us make any work in this period of lockdown, then like what is there other than like news outlets and stuff like that that kind of like documents it? And I have this obsession come fear, I guess, about like things disappearing and things not being tangible. And I guess COVID has made that such like a real thing, because like nothing is really tangible right now. So I feel like, yeah, like I just feel like I need something that like is like, okay, I made this in this period of time. It was made from that space.
Yeah, and even if like it's not necessarily like about COVID or whatever, it still like speaks to the time that we're like occupying and the spaces that we're occupying. Do you feel like you've got any ideas about what that project might be, or did you just
well, yesterday I started writing just like after I'd watched like the film, and I had there been like this moment where I was just like, okay, I need to write something in response.
Are we allowed
Which I
to
have
talk about the film?
I don't know. So for now I say no. It's a film that's coming out, and it's really poignant and it's really relevant for me, I guess, and to my practice. And there was a scene which I guess like the whole film lives within a scene, and I don't know, there's just a part of it and you realize kind of how long this visual had been going on for. And there was this thing about like what it means to be eternal and like living in a time where everything is very like has very clear expiry date, and like everything that we're like consuming right now is on social media, so everything lives within like 24 hours or 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 15 seconds. And I was thinking about like where the people, specifically Black people, gather, which is not online, which is not a club, which is not like an event as such, which is just like to be in each other. Like we have no like cultural community centers, like that is just a space that we can be in physical. And I think physical feels a lot more eternal than digital, which is so temporary.
Definitely.
So maybe something around that. Maybe that was kind of like it's something I keep coming back to. So I'm just like,
And we spoke about it the other day as well, because obviously like I have this obsession with like this idea of close friends and like how we, I don't know, but you're so right though. It's like even, I mean, I guess I should explain my idea about close friends, but obviously we spoke about it the other day that like we at the moment, our generation of artists don't necessarily have this like culture or like sense of community where we like check in on each other and like I guess critique each other and just catch up on like how we are, what our practices are, where our practices are up to, what we're researching, and like we don't really have the chance to riff off each other. I mean, obviously you and I do that because we're like best friends, but like not, I mean like
Yeah, there's not an intentional space for it
yeah,
at all.
exactly. So we it's a very similar vibe, and like to take it offline would be really important because again it means that I don't know, it's this idea of like it not being like traced or tracked or like listened in on, or like just something that's a bit more intimate, I think is like what I'm craving a lot at the moment. And like I was thinking about even because you obviously have Finsta, main Instagram, and then research Instagram, and like your research Instagram's amazing, and then but then you also have like your poems. I presume like a lot of them are written in your notes on your phone, and a lot of them come from various different things that you've seen on your phone, and it's very compact into this tiny like thing that is really difficult to like blow up, I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
especially
like when I haven't performed for so long, like the idea, like
I
I
haven't
haven't performed
performed in so long, like in
since
my life.
Freeze. Freeze was like the last time, and that was like, when was that?
That was like
I
a year.
can't remember that week, but it was over a year ago or around a year ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like and this is what I was saying to you the other day, like this idea of like, I'm really trying to resist making work for Instagram that sits on Instagram as like, Instagram as like the format, because the moment you allow it to be the format, it kind of, that becomes the medium. Like everything, like there's times where like, I don't know, there's times where I'll have to put something into like 30 seconds. It's for a brand, it's for a client, it's something that's like completely different. But when it's like me using like my vernacular, my voice, like my internal voice, it's really hard to like whittle down to like a time frame like that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it is like I have like a desire to like be able to take our work offline and see how it exists and see what exists. And I think you're actually one of my only friends who does have like physical art now, where a lot of people are making, like especially during COVID, there were so many people reaching out being like, I'm doing this online zine, I'm doing this online new publication, I'm doing this online group, and it's amazing. And like it's like cloud communities and creative cloud communities are sick, but like I don't know. I'm just like, what happens to like being in like a space and like pinning things to a wall and like people coming in and like writing notes on your paper and like this kind of like conflict like happening in your space and like
It's quite old
and I
school.
don't write in that setting anymore. Like I don't create in that setting. I create like in my bed or on my sofa or on my like table or on my desk, just like me singular by myself. And it's
But
just
yeah, it feels very much like we're all very isolated. Well, obviously, but like we're very, very by ourselves, and we were before COVID anyway. All of
yeah,
us. Like
yeah.
I think that this has just been like a very intense version of that that's made us go, now we don't want this. Like this is not, well, it's just not actually helpful or healthy because like, you know, obviously I graduated at the start of lockdown. So I went from having these like constant back and forth about my work, other people's work, like being critiqued and critiquing others. And then I graduated and started working on my show. And then I was just like, I feel like I'm literally just talking to myself here.
Yeah,
Like, even though
yeah.
having a show is like taking it all out of it from in here and like putting it somewhere else, it still feels very much like
An
it's a
internal
conversation,
conversation.
an internal conversation. And I think that what I missed was having that like constant back and forth. Like obviously I've got Maggie and like I mean the curators were amazing and everything like that, but it's still, I suppose it was the element of like having someone who's having that lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, that yeah, I really missed out on, and I still feel really weird. So even though
Yeah.
the up, I'm like, oh yeah, but like I haven't spoken to anyone about like.
Yeah, those conversations are so, like, for me, I feel like those conversations are where I process things and like process things most. Like in creating the work, I'm processing it for me, and like it always remains very much like a remedy for myself and like a cathartic experience. That's for me that like I make public. But then in that making public, there's so many like, I don't know, there's so many times where like I'll put something out and like either it will have no interaction because it's not visually stimulating.
Yeah.
So that's another layer that you have to think of. So you have to be like, okay, so like it has to like visually look like something, but then that takes it from a poem to like a short film. And do I want it to exist as a short film, or do I want it to exist as a written poem? And like, if I make that option, does that mean that I have to um compromised my artistry and like what it's named as? So there is like this like weird like to and fro-in, but or there's this idea that like I put it out and then people kind of like react to it and like really react to it, and like loads of people like put emojis in comment sections, but there's no conversation and nobody like goes into my DM and says, oh, I actually want to further talk to you about this, or like how did you think about this, or why did you work, like there's none of that. So in some way it feels like my work has got to this point of like being like so uneditable because the conversations aren't existing with my friends or peers, and then anyone who's like from institution spaces kind of usually doesn't want to say they don't like fuck with it because
But we're still
it,
in this like really fucking weird time where creators are like, yes, I want to show your work, but you know, it's all you. I don't, you know, keep it to yourself. Like I've had a few like meetings with like curators and people like that, and I'm like telling them my shit, and they just look at me like, and I'm like, but some feedback would be nice because I'm not fucking, you know, I'm not. I don't want to be told that everything I'm doing is good because it's just really unhelpful, and it still remains as like something that is very like in my head rather than something that's been like a kind of collaboration, I suppose. I think that that's maybe a good way of putting it, like some kind of collaboration that means that, I don't know, we're not like alone at the end of it, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. I
I
guess,
guess
well, for
for
me
me,
there's need to like know honestly and authentically from people who I want to be the audience what they feel from something, because I feel like otherwise we get to this like very settled point of being like comfortable with our work, but then I'm like, okay, so what comes next? Like at what point does this move further, and at what point, and what does it look like when it moves further?
Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, that's so right. Like I think because as like marginalized people, whatever we are, we are so often uncomfortable with our bodies and in the spaces that we navigate, that our work becomes this thing that we're obsessed with being like perfect and like ours, and we know it, and we like, you know, it's kind of can't be like interrupted by the outside world. And actually I think that that is like a hindrance sometimes to us because you, yeah,
And
it's
also because there's an element of like, I don't know, especially when your work is like lived experience, there's this idea of like wanting to protect it as well, and like not wanting to kind of like sell it to masses, so you have to think about that, but also this kind of like what it is that you're depicting about your lived experience, because I think everything that we do is so assumed to be political that we kind of fall into this space of like, that's why like at the moment I'm like, I actually don't want to continue to kind of like address matters in my work. I kind of maybe I want to make some like silly naive, like I don't know, like teenage angst kind of work. Like I don't want it to be this, and I feel like there's some times where, especially when we're online and our work is sitting alongside news and it's sitting alongside like really like well political stated memes and like all of these things, it kind of changes the whole context. Like anyone's timeline could be different, like, and that's why Instagram for me feels like such a strange platform, because someone who follows me could also follow only football teams, so therefore my work is juxtaposed against that, and other people maybe will follow, I don't know, like meme accounts, or like, so it feels too like uncontrollable.
Yeah, it does feel, yeah, it's like uncontrollable but so controlled at the same time. I
Yeah.
wonder how you feel about, like, obviously, I mean, I guess like in the period of lockdown, like your following has just like been like mad explosive, and like you're famous. So you're famous now, and how does that feel? But like, it's not necessarily because of your work, it's because of, well, I don't know, what do you think it's because of? Your face? You're like, what?
I guess like, I don't know, it's weird. Like social positioning is so strange. I don't understand it. Like I don't understand it. I don't really know how to like receive myself in it.
What's happening
But
so quickly? It's just like,
yeah, it was very like rapid, and there's this idea now where Instagram was once just this like messy journal of mine with like loads of like selfies and like scrap pieces of paper or like views or whatever. And now it's completely different, and I can't engage with it in the same way. Like I can't always track kind of like my friends' things or like friends' messages, and like so it's changed as a platform for me. So now it is more of a work platform. But I think there's also, yeah, I guess it's like you're known for like your social capital, and social capital for me, I don't know what clout is really
yeah.
about.
Do you
I
feel like
don't know.
it like has altered the way that you've been working? Like, because obviously you've been working a lot on like commercial jobs, and then like, is there still time for you to like be like Kai, quiet in the corner, like writing in your journal?
Yeah, there's space for it. Like I have to like dedicate space for it and like really like time that out. But there is still space for it. But also, I don't know, sometimes it's hard. It's really hard to go from like doing loads of commercial jobs and then suddenly be like, okay, I'm back to my writing style. Like that transition, it's almost like a language. It's like if I speak like this with you and then I go and speak that something with someone else and then I come back to you, like it
Mm-hmm.
trans. And I feel like the transferring is something that worries me, because I don't ever want my normal writing to have kind of like that commercial element. Like I still want it to be very sacred and very like for who I want it to be for.
Yeah,
But
I think that in like the recent writing that I've seen you do, like it definitely still feels very intimate and very much like how can I say? I guess like uh unaware of the gaze and the ears that are like listening to it, and I think that that is something that needs to be like kept
yeah,
like
yeah,
I know that you're like, that's like what you're so good at, is just like very much being like, this is for me and this isn't for me, and like
yeah,
that's for you,
yeah,
and like, you know, but
yeah.
yeah.
And it's important. Like I think you have to find time to still write for yourself. And
Mhm.
like for me, like I don't feel, I don't process my feelings until I've made some kind of note in
Yeah.
a in sense. So like I feel like it's really important to, even if it's just journaling, just to continue creating, writing, documenting, because there are points in which I can pull all of those documents together and say, okay, there's something in this,
Mhm.
and there's something people might enjoy, or there's something that might be good to write. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
it's a weird process though. It's a weird process at the moment because you don't know. It's also hard because your audience, now the audience is doubled, and audience is double, but also everyone's on their phone at all moments. So it's a good time to put work out, a really good time to put work out, but it's also quite uh sometimes disconcerting kind of time, because you know that the audience is big and the stage is huge and everyone is watching.
Yeah, exactly. But I also feel like I'm seeing like a really interesting part of your practice that might not have like come through previously, because it's like you're looking more at like the visual aspect of your practice, whereas more before it was kind of like performing and writing, and now it's like there's this like face or this like image that you're thinking about, which is really really interesting, because obviously I'm more like image based. So how do you feel about like, I don't know, going forward, like I guess we've spoken about like how, you know, there's this like visual aspect of it, like maybe you need to put a video to a poem or like kind of force yourself down that road. But have you also enjoyed that? Because obviously there was that point where you did that sick like collaging moment, and that was amazing.
Yeah, that was fun. Like that's the thing, there's definitely been high points with it. Like that was a really fun time to just be able to like explore a different medium and a
Mhm.
different way of people receiving what I was saying, because the importance didn't lay solely on the words. There was suddenly a distraction. So in those moments of distraction, it was kind of like, well, what part grabs your attention more, what I'm saying or what's on the screen? And
Yeah,
then when I decided to do the Browns film with Emily, that was like definitely, I was worried. I was always very skeptical about like creating like a short visual film with a poem. It can sometimes look naff, like just not like, I don't know. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And also it's really hard to do it with somebody else, because it's like I know what my poems look like in my head. Like I know exactly what the sentence, I know what the visual is, but to try and relay that to someone else or also get someone else's vision on that, it's like difficult. But it just worked, and like we created something, and I was like, this is really the visual to like what I'm talking about. And because we hadn't tried to do this like abstracted, like complete, like some of it was so simple, some of it was so literal, and like their visuals that maybe I would have shied away from, but somebody with the expertise of directing like Emily could say to me, well, no, this will work. So that collaborative feel was definitely a point in which I think my work elevated to something else. And I knew that it could exist in another realm. And that realm could be like documented in short films or yeah, something
yeah.
like that.
Sorry, my connection is being lame. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
This is so funny because it's been recorded. um, yeah, that's really important. It's funny that like, you know, obviously both of us have just been like, we want to talk to other people about our work, but then as soon as that actually happens and as soon as other people are involved, it's like, but
Mm-hmm.
how do I like give over the reins a little bit? Have
Yeah.
you, I guess actually like over lockdown as well, you've been collaborating quite heavily with other people because of the circumstances, and that's like, I don't know, do you feel like you've enjoyed it, or are you trying, I guess, like with this like project, whatever it might turn out to be, do you feel like you want other people involved, or you're like, this is something for me?
I don't know. I think part of it, I think the core of it has to be with me. But there's definitely like even earlier, I was like, oh, I really like we need to take some photos to go with it. So like, there's definitely kind of like select people that I'd want for to be part of it. But yes, most of the majority of it for me, and also the idea that the person that I'm documenting it with, it's also for them too. So that's nice to think about, because yeah, there are points, I don't know, especially when you're like collaborating with brands or you're collaborating with like other influencers or you're part of like a campaign with other influencers, there's this like dual responsibility that you're kind of like, oh, like who are you, what are you about?
Mm-hmm.
um and that's
That's very
difficult.
like side eye. It's like, but it's also just like, I don't know, interesting that like I feel like obviously like white artists having conversations don't have to speak about who they're working with and how like how they're getting like the coin to produce the work that they're making, and it's very rarely with brands because there's money in the arts for white people. And like, do you feel like I don't know. I don't have a question, but I guess that's what I'm thinking about now, because like now the show's over, like, and because I'm working with like students at the moment, they have been like, so how do you get a show then? How do you like sell your work? And I'm like, you literally just have to rely on other people, and like just be like all I can say to them is just be like, Instagram, like get your shit out there so that people can see that you're like worth their time, which is so gross to say to like kids, but it feels.
Yeah, so many points where I'm just like, oh, like I don't know. I'll wake up and I'll be like, fuck Instagram. Like, I don't want it to exist, and not because Instagram's bad, but because I think anything with the kind of like vast allowance of like what it can be, it can be dangerous, like anything. And it's not Instagram's fault, it's, I guess, like the society that's molded around it maybe. But there's definitely like a part of it that I'm just like, I owe so much to this platform, because it allows me to do what I want to do, but with the outreach that I could never do.
Well, yeah, it just allows us to be visible in a society where
Like,
that's.
there's so many times where like people message me and they'll say like the other day somebody said like, you helped me come out, and I was kind of like, I don't know, I get I get overwhelmed, because I'm like, I don't even know how to like digest that kind of information. Or people will say like, thank you for your visibility, it taught me this. Or, and it's like, it really does make you aware that, like, I don't know, there will be somebody who messages me in Singapore who's like, I see you, like, thank you for like, and that's like, how else without this crazy, huge, massive app, how else would I be able to do that? How else would we be able to make money in the way that we make money? How else would, like, I don't know. I'm not saying that it's all good, but I think,
It's really.
especially in the art scene, there's a stigma around it. Like, sometimes I'm embarrassed. Like, when I'm with art people, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be seen as an influencer. And it's like, you know, like this is our canvas now. This is the same. This is the same as tagging in the streets. Like, Instagram is like tagging in the streets. It's the same shit.
So true. Yeah, it's just about like just like putting like propelling yourself in the same way that tagging in the streets like is like this overwhelming presence of like people trying to tell you that they exist, and it's like, I guess that we're just doing the same. So obviously the other day we were texting, and then like we were having some nice chats, and you obviously liked something that you had said in that chat, and then you like screenshot it and put it on your Instagram, and like writing more poems like this, which I found really interesting, because it's like taking this element of communication, like the only element of communication that we have at the moment, and just like turning it into work, or recognizing it as work even, is really cool. So what do you think, like, I don't know, I don't have a question, it's just a statement.
About that, I
What do you
guess.
think about?
I'm glad that you see it. I think because, so I have this thing of like, people don't like reading poetry. Like, people, it's not like an easy medium or format to kind of like fall into. A lot of people are quite intimidated by it, because we think of like the romantics, or we think of like, I don't know, like we never really think of like spoken word poetry when we think about reading poetry, and we
Well, I
don't think
feel
about.
quite academic in the sense that like we shy away from it if it's not something that we've like heard or can
Yeah,
like
yeah. It's because people don't read it. People are intimidated by it because it comes through as such like a, yeah, like academic, or like just like non-relevant kind of space. So sometimes I'm so heavily influenced by all of the things around me, like conversations, text, images, like whatever it is, because they too exist as like anything that you want to be read as a poem can be a poem. Like once I took 3 photographs of my skylight, and it was like 3 plain trails, like air trails, whatever they're called, going through each other. And I was like, a series of poems epitomizing love. And so like, I like taking like bite-sized pieces of things and trying to turn them into something wider, because for me, like, I guess like poetry feels very much like my language. Like whatever I say, like whether it's like this conversation here or something that I like sit down and specifically write in a certain way, I feel like it's all kind of, it's the same. Like it's just my head. It's just all of the words in my head. So like, why not name it a
Yeah.
poem?
Yeah, for real. That's so nice.
I don't know if that's fantastic, but like, I don't know. There's just nothing. People are always like, "Oh, describe your poetry," and I'm like, I don't know how to. It's just me talking. Like, it's the same as if me and you sit down and have a conversation about tea. Like, it's just I'm talking about tea, or like I'm writing about trans people. Like, I don't know what. It's just there's nothing specific to it that I can pinpoint.
Yeah, I think it's the same way as just like making like art in general. I guess it's just like how, I don't know, like it's just, I guess the role of the artist is to just like hone in on something and recognize this as something that is important and something that needs to be frozen almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And that's it. It's like this idea of preservation. And
Yeah.
this is what this project I think is going to be so much about, of like attaining. Like I wrote this essay and there's a part of it that's like I'm fascinated with, no, I'm obsessed with buying all the Averexes in London town because I don't want any more white boys buying this shit. We still got Tims that can stamp them out, like all of this like shit, and then it goes into like, oh, like I don't know why I'm talking like this. I don't want to think like this anymore. This shit, and it's like I don't know, this idea of like narration and documentation and
And archiving.
and yeah, and that's it,
Mhm.
preserving and archiving, because like when we do not exist anymore, it will only be like our belongings and what we've left behind that's ever gonna allow anyone to depict us as anything. When people, when all of our friends and family and people that knew us also aren't here, then that's we have left. That's your legacy. So for me, like creating a legacy that's like really transparent and really like honest and really tangible and really here and present is like super important, because if I lose my phone when I die, how's anyone gonna know? Like my my Instagram will just stop and it will just like glitch. Someone will buy my Instagram, someone will buy my handle. I'm like
I'll buy it.
weird, like yeah, buy it. Otherwise it'll be some weird like meme account or
I know if
some
we could
weird
do like a thing where you like start leaving your like handle, your Instagram and your will to people.
ooh
That would be
ooh maybe that, yeah, but maybe that's it. Like maybe that's like transferring people money. Like that's
currency.
Instagram, that's a currency now.
Oh my
It
God.
is like Instagram's a currency. It is
I have
likes.
followers in my will.
When you like someone's thing, it's like sometimes people I'll like something and they'll like something back, and I'm like, it's not transactional. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not. But Instagram and social media makes everything so transactionable
I think
and
that's what we're saying though, isn't it? It's just that we're the transactions that happen online, we would like to take those transactions and bring them like AFK, like away from keyboard, and have them just in our own spaces, our own intimate spaces.
AFK, away from key.
AFK.
Hey, that's sick. What?
That's Legacy Russell. That's Legacy Russell. Because obviously, like Legacy Russell always speaks about this like idea that online and offline are not separate.
Yeah.
So instead of having IRL and like whatever, it's just AFK.
Um,
Shout out Legacy Russell.
no, there is like a real need, and I think there's a real and also I wonder if people then will realize that the affirmation that you get from the physical like completely like blows out the validation that you can get online, because it's so surface. Like it's so easy to go onto somebody's page and like loads of things and drop loads of emojis and respond to some stories, but like actually sitting there and that's why I saw like a meme text posting that said like, take your work offline, will it still survive? And I was like, fuck, like that's the question, like that is it, like because there are so many things that I'm like, could you sit in a room and explain what it's about to other people, artists, creators, whatever it is, could you sit down and actually talk about it like as like this, like not necessarily tangible in like a physical, like this is a painting you can see, but like in a way that's like coherent and like well thought about? Or is this just something that works on the format of Instagram
Yeah.
or online?
Yeah,
And I think a lot of
I
people's
think
work
it's like a similar way to like earlier, like I had to describe my show to my auntie. And it's like, how do you describe what a show called Born British, Die British is to a black woman who has fought her whole life just to exist in the meantime of being born and dying British? And it's like, that's her story actually,
yeah,
that I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
tell back to her.
yeah.
And it's like it's like the same thing, like taking that, like, while the show is like AFK, is it
Mm, mm,
especially at these times, like when people can't access certain spaces, like everything is very much like online. So like, how do you, I don't know, it was a really interesting moment where I was like trying to explain this thing and I was like, wait, this is your story, like you know about this already. And like I think that is, I mean, I don't know how I got to this point, but that's what we're talking about, is like, I don't know, this transferring of like information and conversation into spaces
mm.
and into worlds that perhaps need it more than, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you get me.
I get you, and I feel like in some senses, like when I think about utopias, like I like to think about utopias as actual places that can exist. So
Mm,
like a lot of my work centers utopias as being like club spaces or galleries or people's houses or beds or like locations. And I think that's like a real important part of the conversation that we should be having as well, as like how do we, because like I feel like this idea of safe spaces is something that we've moved past. I feel like safe spaces are something that we can never ensure complete safety for everyone. We can ensure inclusive and intentional spaces, and those spaces can be birthed from like kind of like, I hope, like utopias that we can actually exist in and havens that we can exist in, like here and like with people who also need those spaces to
mm,
survive. And I think that that needs to be like at the core of things, like not always just escapism, but like actually like, we talk about these ideal, how many times someone's been like can you like describe like a safe space, or like what should allies do to like ensure a safe space? And I'm like, I say all of these things and I'm like, but what is that? Like, what do I want to, like, do I see like a fluffy couch with loads of my friends in it? Do
yeah.
I see a huge art gallery with loads of black people in it? Like, what is that? And like, how do we make these utopias living spaces in which do give us moments of respite from
Yeah,
the bullshit of Babylon?
idea of
And like, that's it.
the idea of the safe space is really interesting because I find that actually centers um people who maybe shouldn't be there,
Yeah,
and therefore that's why it has to be a safe space, because there's
yeah,
certain people who might not be understanding or like sympathetic to certain
yeah,
people in the room. And it's like a safe space, like do the people, or do the people, yeah, like do the most vulnerable people in that space really feel safe if it's having to
yeah.
be, like this, I don't know, it's just this very weird thing. And I think that I agree with, we're past it. Like I personally, like obviously those spaces are 100% valid and like needed in some situations, but between friends, between close friends,
Mm,
let it all hang out. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
Like tell me what you think of me,
yeah.
because I think that we've gotten to a point now where even in our communities, like safety is key, but at the same time, like holding people accountable is really key, and like holding.
Yeah, and confrontation is really hard, especially between marginalized people, especially between people who have to deal with confrontation in so many other elements of their life. Like, there's so many times where like we don't want to have any more confrontation.
Yeah,
But I think there is a way to like compassionately critique one another and hold each other to account, like accountable regards, and also still hold each other in that moment.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be this kind of like discarding of people, or like elimination or you know, this kind of like throwing people off to some distant island. Like it can still be, it can still be nurturing, and it can still, and I think a lot of that would happen if we had more nuance and conversations and
Yeah.
ideas about work and what we were creating, because that says what we're thinking. And maybe in that moment, before you even need to be held accountable, maybe you have you make some work about something crops up with someone, you have a conversation with it, and it tears down that idea that you could say or do something that may be offensive to somebody else who holds a disprivilege that you don't.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like, yeah, I think, I hope that this idea of safe spaces, because I feel like it became very much a buzzword, very much an aesthetic as well. This idea of like this, like same as woke, like all of this shit was kind of like gold star, gold star. And I hope that now we kind of have spaces that like are safe based on the fact that the people in those spaces want to be in the spaces and can understand why those
Yeah.
spaces are important
Yeah.
and need to be like safe. Yeah, I guess in essence.
Definitely. It's just like weird that, like, I suppose both like you and I, our conversations that we've had previously are all about like moving forward, and after COVID, like we're gonna do this, or like hopefully we want to, I don't know, like make this space or whatever, and it's all post COVID and we actually don't know the end of this thing. And so I suppose now our challenge is like, how do we create those types of conversations and those types of spaces that we want to exist AFK online, but have to do
Yeah.
it online, or like, is that possible? Or
Because that's the thing, because like when you think about safe, like if we ever think about safe spaces, like I don't think about online. Like like the amount of times that like I've made articles about safe spaces posted on platforms that are like people in the comment section or in my DMs are trolling like in the most unsafe manner. And it's kind of ironic that we're having these conversations and we're having these progressive things, but these platforms are still not actually safeguarding people when they're being vulnerable in those moments. So it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if the internet feels safe. Like I don't know. There's always this idea of surveying,
yeah,
and I feel like that surveying, especially for like queer people, black people, marginalized people, like that surveying is like not something that we want and not something that we actually can recognize is good for us, because it never has been. So I feel like, you know, like there's sometimes where I'm like, actually, no, I don't want to say this across Instagram. I'm gonna wait until I see this person, because I don't, yeah, there is, I don't know, there's still this like untrusting element that's kind of
yeah,
like databases and statistics and algorithms have been used against us for like so many years and continue to be, that I'm just like, I don't know
sure.
if we can create full safe spaces whilst the systems and the institutes that hold social media together are
It's
still slow.
Dean snoring right now.
Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Hey, stop snoring.
Dean's
You
wake
don't
up.
want, he's like, Daddy's talking this shit again, and I don't want to hear it. I hear it every day.
Dude, this is a safe
He's
space, Dean.
like, fuck Instagram. He
Yeah.
but
No, but you're so
but
right.
yeah.
It's like in the same vein that like this conversation between you and I now is very comfortable, but then I'm very well aware that it's going to be posted on another platform that we don't have control of. And I think that the thing that we're trying to like navigate is like, it's the people around us that we are either comfortable with or uncomfortable with. And like,
Yeah.
when that transcends the space that we're actually like congregating, that's when it becomes like scary. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just think basically I think we should all move in together, lock the
Have
door,
a big,
lower the
big
blinds, fire up
yeah,
the smoke machine, and put on your heels.
yeah,
It's a
man.
kiki, it's a kiki, like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
it
what we
is.
can really learn from, like,
That's the thing though. That's what I've really missed. Like, it's not the idea of clubs. It's not the idea of going out getting pissed. It's not that. It's this idea of just like being with other bodies. Like my
yeah,
favorite thing to write about, my favorite thing to think about, my favorite thing to experience is being in, you know, like my kind of space
yeah,
amongst friends, people I feel comfortable with, like skin touching skin, like everyone just like close and like within like such a important physical proximity to one another. And I think that's what people are really struggling with in COVID. And
I
I
mean,
think
this is
there's
weird now because like obviously the other day we were with each other and like it felt like really normal to like see you and
yeah,
be like, hey, we're gonna chat because
yeah,
that's what we do. But then the other day I could like smell you and touch you, and
yeah.
that's like this feels very different. Like there's no
Yeah, completely different format.
yeah,
It's so formal.
yeah,
Even though it's comfortable, there's a formality to
yeah,
it.
definitely. It's weird. We can't snog.
Exactly.
So.
So we kind of associated completely. It was just like, no, fuck this, I'm out. I kind of rate it for a year. I'm like, do you know what? If you want to be a memorable year,
Mhm.
you've done it. Like you've actually like outdone yourself. Like this,
Congratulations.
we are living through like a civil rights movement, a pandemic, like like racism, Brexit, like just everything, like actually
Trump.
everything at once. Trump, like an
Week
election, the
alone,
most
like this week
memorable
alone.
election,
It's been
like
months.
mad. It's mad.
So
It's truly mad. So
we
the next
yeah.
thing that comes has to be something amazing, but also what is now has to be preserved and has to be restored, because especially for Black people, especially for queer people, it's been like a very violent year, very violent year, but also a year in which like you have never seen so much like incredible work and resilience and activism and visibility. And I think like just knowing that one day we'll look back on this and be able to say like that's us and that's our friends, and like we're at the forefront of like the change of the most kind of poignant definitive year that ever was, and we were on the right side of it. And
Amen. I think that that's a good place to leave it. I love you so much.
Kai for president.
Oh.
Yeah,
This is
level.
actually your presidential
This is
election.
actually my presidential election. Thank you.
Oh, I love you
Yeah,
so much. Thank you.
I love you.
I really need a wee now because I'm drinking this pint of
That big
alcohol.
old beer.
Big
That
old.
big old beer. Big old beer.
I love you so much. It's so nice
I
to
love you. Yes, I'll FaceTime you soon.
FaceTime soon. Yeah, FaceTime me, bitch. I love you.
Ah.
See you later, baby.